Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our ASI webinar, The State of the Flock, the NAHMS Sheep 2024 study. This webinar is a result of the Animal Health Committee's discussions regarding the ASI Convention's Animal Health Committee meeting agenda and our limited time for speakers at that meeting, which will be on January 29th, 2026, beginning at 7 a.m. Amy, correct me if I'm not right on that time.
You're correct.
The committee agreed to have NAHMS give us an update via webinar so we could dedicate more time to be spent describing the findings of the 2024 sheep study. And we thank Drs. Urey and Wiedenheft for joining us this evening. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Wolf.
Thank you, Jim. We're going to hear from 3 speakers tonight, and there'll be time for questions as well at the end. First, we'll hear from Dr. Allison Wiedenheft, who has been the biologics coordinator at NAHMS since 2015, and she has led the biologic collection in multiple commodities, which included the GOAT 2019 study and the Sheep 2024 study. She has a cooperative agreement through Colorado State University, where she also received her master's. Allison grew up in Illinois and attended the University of Illinois College of Veterinary Medicine. We're also going to hear from Natalie Urey. Natalie's also a veterinarian. Sorry, I failed. Well, yeah, you realize that. Sorry. And Natalie grew up in a small agricultural town in Michigan where she raised livestock and was actively involved in 4-H. She earned her DVM and Bachelor of Science degrees from Colorado State University and a Master of Public Health from the Colorado School of Public Health. For the past 13 years, she has worked with the NAHMS, leading multiple national studies across livestock industries and also contributing to outbreak responses, including highly pathogenic avian influenza in both poultry and dairy cattle. And Allison will introduce Colin Hayes, who will be another speaker. Thank you.
All right, is this me? Is it go time?
Yeah, go, Allison. Let me say one quick thing before we get started with your introduction of Colin. This webinar is brought to us by the American Sheep Industry Association with funding support from the USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. So we thank APHIS for the funding support and again, appreciate our speakers. Back to you, Allison.
Okay, we also have with us Colin Hayes, who is a PhD student for Louisiana State University, and he is part of our cooperative agreement with Louisiana State, and he worked on our gastrointestinal parasites, and he's going to talk about results towards the end of this presentation. Hopefully I got all that right, Colin. Great. All right, so I guess I'll go ahead and get started then. Once again, welcome to the NAHMS Sheep 2024 study. We're really glad to have this opportunity to speak with you today, and we're glad you could join us. Again, my name is Dr. Allison Wiedenheft, and I'm the NAHMS Biologics Coordinator. The NAHMS team has had a lot of changes over this past year, and we really felt like it was important to meet with you today and to let you know that we're still working hard on the Sheep 2024 data. Today, I'm going to share some of those preliminary results of the data with you for both phase 1 and phase 2 of the study. Again, the data is preliminary because we are actively working on statistical validation for the study reports and manuscripts. And so I am going to give this presentation, and then Dr. Urey is going to jump in the middle. I work closely with Dr. Urey in the study. She was the small ruminant commodity lead. It's sad that she's no longer with NAHMS, but I still rely on Natalie for her vast small ruminant knowledge. And then towards the end, we'll hear from Colin about the internal parasite results. So what are NAHMS studies? NAHMS works collaboratively with the industry, and for this study, we work closely with the American sheep industry. All of our studies are confidential, and we continue to work to ensure that all of our information is kept private and confidential, including removing our FIPS state codes from our NAHMS ID so that nothing can be tracked back to specific states. In general, we collect important information on animal health, including general management, biosecurity practices, and disease prevalence. On this slide, we have our SHEEP 2024 study objectives. NAHMS develops study objectives by exploring existing literature and contacting industry members about their informational needs and priorities. Major focuses of the SHEEP 2024 study included internal parasite and anthelmintic resistance, antimicrobial stewardship and resistance, and describing economically important diseases. Some of the diseases discussed in the questionnaire included OPP, caseous lymphadenitis, sore mouth, scrapie, and Johne's disease. And then lameness is also a large focus of the questionnaire and the biologics. This slide is just kind of a general overview of the study. The General Sheep Management Questionnaire was administered by the National Agricultural Statistical Service, we call that NASS, between January and April of 2024. And then operations with one or more ewes in the 30 states shown in color on this map were eligible to participate. And then after completing phase 1 of the questionnaire and a consent form, producers with 20 or more ewes were contacted by veterinary services to participate in phase 2 of the study. And phase 2 of the study included the VS Health and Management Questionnaire and biologic sampling by veterinary services. And the phase 2 of the study occurred between April and December of 2024. The 30 states selected to participate in the study accounted for 84% of the operations with one or more sheep and lambs, and 91% of the sheep and lambs on operations in the United States. States were chosen based on their percentage of sheep inventory or sheep operations, the change in their percentage of sheep inventory or operations over time, for their geographic representativeness, and inclusion of more states in the southeastern region, and response burden. The southeast region is new for the study, and we added it because there's been a growth in the haired sheep, pun intended there, across the US, but especially in the southeast region. Additionally, that southeast region also has management practice issues and different disease prevalences, especially when we're thinking about GI parasites. So we want to make sure we included them in our study this year, or last year. All right, so I'm going to go over the 2 phases in the biologics today. First, I'm going to go over phase 1, the reporting phase of this phase 1, and show you what we've done and what we are going to do. This customized flock health management report is something we sent out after the study ended. This is something new we did for the sheep. And every phase 1 participant received this customized flock health management report. This report compared their operations to other operations that participated in the study, and it covered a variety of topics, including record keeping, visitor contact, veterinary use, and antibiotic stewardship. Currently, we're working on our first descriptive report called the Reference of Sheep Management Practices. This report is written and is undergoing number checking and internal review, and we'll let the industry know when this report is available on our website. But until then, let's go ahead and go through some of the preliminary results of this report. Before I discuss these results, though, we do have a disclaimer that the data is still undergoing number checking, and we will need to review the data multiple times before it is finalized. So for phase 1 of the study, we had 2,431 farms complete the first questionnaire. Our response rate, according to their formula that we use, was 60%. And in general, survey methodologists consider anything over 30% a great response rate. So we are very happy with these results. And we feel like the study was well supported by the industry and producers. So we thank you. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to Dr. Natalie Urey, who's going to talk more about the sheep management results.
Thanks, Allison. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, first off, I just want to say thank you to Allison and the NOMS team for continuing to push forward. Leaving NOMS was not a decision I made lightly, but it was the best option for my family at the time. So definitely still here supporting them. Want to make sure that we see these studies through. These results are really important, not only to the NOMS teams, but for industry and for all of the producers that directly participated and helped provide us with this information. So I just want to take a moment and say thank you to all of those that participated and took the time to complete those surveys, those questionnaires. We know that they're lengthy and they're not easy, but that information will be put to good use. So with that, we're just going to go over a bit of demographic information and highlight some of these preliminary results. As Allison said, these numbers still need to go and undergo statistical review, and that includes checking the numbers and making sure that the way that we output the data were correct. But they have been weighted, so these do represent the U.S. sheep population as a whole, and they're weighted back to those operation levels. So in general, we have more of our sheep on large operations, and then we have a lot of small operations with less sheep. So the weighting kind of just brings everything back to that baseline population. So first, when we look at primary production type, which this is computed for each operation based on the use of the majority of their sheep. So for example, let's say you have a bunch of meat sheep that you have, and then you also have a few wool sheep and show sheep. Your primary operation type would be assigned meat for this figure. So as you can see, and there were also a very small number of operations that reported an equal amount of sheep for each production type. Those were randomly assigned a production type based on probability, but there were very few of those. So as you can see in this figure here, most production was, our meat production was the most commonly reported primary production type across all flock sizes. So from very small to large, a lot of the operations are primarily meat producing. Wool production was more frequently reported as the primary production type on medium and large operations compared to those small operations. And then you can also see that we have a handful of operations across all size classes that are brush control, fire suppression, and solar grazing. And those seem to be a more commonly reported primary production type on our very small operations compared to our small, medium, and large operations. So this just gives you a general idea of the sizes of our sheep operations out there today and what the use of those sheep are across those operations. Now here's another figure that looks at primary flock type. So this is defined by the method by which the majority of the sheep and lambs were managed during daylight hours during 2023. So those are categorized into herded open range, fenced farm, and dry lot indoors. So this graph compares the primary flock type within the 4 regions. These results highlight how flock management practices really differ by geography, and with the cultivated systems being more prevalent in our coastal and southeastern regions. And then we really see those herded operations concentrated in our central region in the US. Overall, our results showed that herded open ranges were more common in the central region than our other regions. Fenced farms were less common in the central regions compared to our other regions, where they really stood out in the west, northeast, and southeast. And then our dry lot indoor systems were more commonly used in the Northeast, which is what we would expect. So I think these things, none of these are like aha moments, but it really just paints that baseline picture of what our flock management looks like across the United States. So in this study, about a quarter of all of our operations reported they expected to have fewer or no sheep in the next 5 years. The main reason listed for having less sheep was due to retirement or lack of a successor. However, this question didn't address why there was a lack of a successor, which is likely due to larger systematic issues such as low land prices, market volatility, and then the increase of production costs. Now, comparing this to the data in 2011, the percentage of operations that expected to have no or fewer sheep has increased a bit. So in 2011, we had 17% of operations that expected to have fewer or no sheep in the next 5 years. However, the reason has stayed pretty consistent with the 79.3% of operations reporting a family or personal issue as the main reason in the 2011 study. On a more positive note, though, we have seen that about a quarter of farms plan to grow their flocks in the next 5 years. So I think this is really great news. Additionally, the years of operator experience has held pretty steady with an average of 25 years of experience in 2024. And that was pretty similar to what we saw in 2011. So I think this tells us we aren't having this huge influx of new producers, which we've seen in the goat industry, which brings its own set of challenges, but we kind of have a steady flow of folks entering and leaving the industry, which I think really helps bridge that knowledge gap and make sure that we're having good management practices as time goes on and industry changes. So here we're looking at direct sales to consumers or ethnic markets during the 2023 years. So one of the reasons I thought this would be interesting, it would be interesting to look at direct sales to consumers or ethnic markets is because this aspect of, it's an aspect of sales where we've really seen growth. So in 2011, we had 17% of operations reporting direct sales to consumers. And now we see that that's 24% of operations. So there's definitely been a bit of growth in this market area. Now for those operations that are participating in direct sales, we see that 22% are selling lambs, 9% are selling cull sheep, and then 15% are selling breeding sheep or other sheep on their operation. And on average, if an operation sells that class of animal, they're selling around 127 lambs per year, 34 culls, and 67 breeding or other sheep. Now, I don't have it on the slide, but we did ask about slaughter on site on the farm. And the data showed that 13% of operations that sold lambs directly slaughtered them on site. And then 3% of operations that sold culled sheep and 16% of operations that sold breeding sheep also slaughtered them on site. So we have a decent percent of operations that are participating on that on-farm slaughter as well. And then lastly, I was just going to touch base on record keeping. So I think record keeping in general is very important. Accurate and consistent record keeping is really the cornerstone of effective livestock management. So it helps support decision-making relating to breeding, health treatments, culling, nutrition, and just overall productivity of an operation. So maintaining records also enhances traceability, which we all know is important. It helps improve that financial planning and then increases the eligibility for certification programs or marketing opportunities as well. So the adoption of a formal record keeping system may vary based on flock size and different management intensities and the overall operation goals as well. However, here we can see that over half of all of our operations kept handwritten notes, 13% used electronic record keeping systems, and then another 28%, or just over a quarter, did not maintain any records. For those that did maintain records, the most common records maintained included number of lambs born, date of lambing, number of animals that died, number culled, and then preventive practices such as vaccinations. Overall, these numbers held very similar to what we saw in 2011, However, back in 2011, we did not ask about livestock or sheep management software. So that was a new addition. And with that, I will turn it back over to Allison.
Okay. All right, so now we're jumping into diseases. This slide is looking at the percent of operation by diseases suspected or confirmed in the previous 3 years. And on this slide, we're looking at operations with 20 or more ewes. And I chose this group because they can be compared to the ewes in 2011 VS questionnaire data that looked at operations with 20 or more ewes. So in 2011, the 4 most common diseases suspected or confirmed in the previous 3 years were sore mouth, foot rot, enterotoxemia, and coccidiosis. And they were all, hovering around 35%. And while these diseases are still in our top 5 suspected or confirmed in 2023, the percentages were lower for all of these diseases. Vaccination strategies, especially for enterotoxemia, could be partially accountable for the lower percentages in 2023. And we're going to look at these vaccination practices in the next descriptive report coming up. Not shown on the slide are the percentage of operations that suspected or confirmed coccidiosis, sore mouth, enterotoxemia, lamb pneumonia in the previous 3 years. We didn't show this data, but they were higher in the medium or large operations than in the smaller flock sizes. And then you can see here down in the 1% area, we have scrapie suspects. We're going to look more at scrapies in the next slide. As you know, scrapie is a fatal degenerative disease affecting the central nervous system of both sheep and goats, and infected flocks with a high percentage of susceptible animals can experience a significant loss of production. Later, I'm going to talk about breeding for less susceptible animals. The presence of scrapie in the United States also prevents the export of breeding stock, semen, and embryos to many other countries, and scrapie is part of an eradication program in the United States. The last case of classical scrapie in the US was identified in 2021. Scrapie has a long incubation period of about 5 years, so it makes it necessary to wait for at least 7 years in order to, after the last case, to declare us fully eradicated. In this study, we found that the majority of operations were familiar with scrapie, so either very familiar or somewhat familiar. We have 63%. Both sore mouth and Q fever are zoonotic diseases, and it's important to promote producer awareness and management practices to prevent the transmission of these diseases to human. A higher percentage of operations reported or suspected or confirmed sore mouth in family members at 4% than with Q fever at 1%. And operations that were medium or large compared to smaller operations had a higher percentage of these diseases in family or employees in the previous 3 years. Having a good relationship with your veterinarian can help with not only disease management, but lambing and lamb management, biosecurity, and a wide variety of other subjects. Overall, we saw 34% of the operations consulted a vet for any reason related to sheep in 2023. And the method of consult included farm visits and phone or text or email consults. And then for the other 2/3 of the operations that did not use a vet, the most common reason reported was that they did not need one. 48% said they did not have any sheep with health problems, and 26% said they did not need a vet because they treated the animals themselves. Okay, now we're going to move on to phase 2 of the study. This is going to be kind of a quick update because the data tables are still being generated. The veterinary services phase 2 of the study, focuses on breeding and lambing management, culling management, biosecurity, and sheep health, including parasite control, lameness, antimicrobial use, health conditions, and losses. We really had a great response thanks to the producers and veterinary services that took the time to complete the study. And I know you're super interested in seeing these results, especially because of this great response rate. And we're going to continue to work hard in getting this information onto our website as soon as possible. Part of the phase 2 visit to the operations included optional biologic collection by veterinary professionals. Natalie and I really enjoyed this phase of our study because it allowed us to work side by side with the producers, and we just had a great time working with them. We do have some results to share with you, but I have the same disclaimer as I did before, that these data is still undergoing number checking, and some of the biologics data still need to be weighted to make them national estimates. And then they're going to be reviewed multiple times before they're finalized. This slide just shows you the types of samples that were offered to be collected from each operation. Producers seemed the most interested in the composite fecal collection for egg counts and anthelmintic resistance testing. In this study, instead of using only a Gentrite test to look for anthelmintic resistance on a subset of farms, we decided to do genetic testing on the parasites for all farms to look for resistance. And Colin and I are going to talk more about this later. Scrapie genotyping was also very popular among producers. Blood samples were collected from sheep and were tested for the presence of alleles. Alleles are the alternative form of the same gene that appear to make sheep less susceptible to classical scrapie. And then we also collected intradigital swab samples and tested those samples for foot rot pathogens. So after I received the results from the labs, the producers were sent individual reports. These reports were either sent out by email if the producer provided their address, or by mail. And I still need to send out anthelmintic resistance results and about half of the foot rot pathogen results, but I'm waiting for those results because we've had some testing delays. Okay, so now we're going to jump into the preliminary results from the biologic testing. Once again, this is unweighted data, and it still needs to be cleaned up, so results may change. The next few slides are going to look at our Scrapie genotyping results. Transmission of Scrapie is not completely understood, and apparently healthy sheep affected with Scrapie can transmit the disease. Sheep and goats are typically affected as young lambs or kids, though adult sheep and goats can become affected. Scrapie can be transmitted from affected ewes during or following lambing, or when flock mates or newborn lambs get ingest the affected placenta, birthing fluids, affected colostrum, or the milk, or contaminated bedding. And then once affected, the animal remains affected for life. Blood samples collected were tested for the presence of alleles that appear to make the sheep less susceptible to classical scrapie. Evidence showed that sheep with at least one single copy of R171 are genetically less susceptible to scrapie. So that's the QR you see. And then they're less susceptible to classical scrapie than 2 copies of the normal allele QQ. So in the study, we saw that 39% of the sheep tested had a QR at the codon 171. And then 40% of the sheep tested actually had 2 copies of that R171 allele. So that's really good. All right, this is looking at the alleles by region. You'll see the northeast and the southeast, so that's the orange and the light blue, had a higher percentage of sheep with 2 copies of the R171 than the west and central regions. So that's right here. All right, now we're looking at flock type. We are also seeing that pasture and dry lot indoor sheep had a higher percentage of the RR than the open or fenced range sheep. Good right here. And then finally, when we break out the RR allele by different breed categories, we're seeing that the black-faced sheep have the highest percentage of RR. Historically, black-faced sheep have been more susceptible to scrapie than other sheep, and so the sheep and goats health staff and producers have worked hard to promote scrapie genetic resistance in these breeds, and we can see that with these results, it looks like that effort has worked. All right, so now we're jumping into our enteric microbes. And first, I'm going to share a brief overview of these Campylobacter results. We had 57% of operations have at least one positive sample for Campylobacter, and about 14% of the sampled sheep were positive. These results were pretty similar to 2011 study where we had 54% of the operations and 13% of the sheep positive. The next slide is going to look at the Campy species breakout. So C. jejuni is of particular interest because it can lead to later term abortions and stillbirths in newly affected pregnant ewes. We plan on doing future research on the C. jejuni resistance and its abortion clone with Iowa State University. Here are some salmonella results. We had a very low percentage of sheep farms operate at the operational level that were positive for salmonella, and an even smaller number of sheep that were positive. This slide is looking at Clostridium perfringens. This is a new bacteria we included this year. These bacteria are normally found in low numbers in the gastrointestinal tract of all sheep and goats, but cause problems when they start increasing in numbers in the intestines. This usually occurs due to diet change in the sheep and can lead to enterotoxemia, which is also called overeating disease. We found a very high prevalence of Clostridium perfringens at both the operational level and at the sheep level. Routine vaccination for Clostridium perfringens type C and D in lambs and kids is a very effective way in preventing this disease. These isolates that we collected will undergo antimicrobial resistance testing at NBSL. That's to come later. All right, this is our lameness pathogens results slide. Lameness on sheep operations can reduce both animal production and animal quality of life. Lameness can be caused from infectious agents resulting in scald or interdigital dermatitis, foot rot, or contagious ovine digital dermatitis. Or non-infectious agents could cause lameness, such as injury. Foot rot is one of the main causes of lameness in sheep. And it's important to identify the bacteria that's actually causing the foot rot to provide effective treatment and management. We've tested about half of our samples so far, but we're seeing that about 3/4 of the operations tested positive for the lameness pathogens. And in the next slide, we're going to look at the breakout of these pathogens. All right, here are the bacteria that we've identified as lameness pathogens. And again, it's important to identify these bacteria, the bacteria causing foot rot, to provide the effective treatment and management. All right, moving on to GI parasites. We had about 300, I think maybe exactly 338 operations submit composite samples from about 6,000 sheep. On these operations, the average fecal egg count was 535 eggs per gram of feces. However, the fecal odd count range on these farms varies. About 50% had less than 200 eggs per grams, and about 5% had a fecal odd count of greater than 2,500. Additionally, Louisiana State University used an ELISA copoa antigen test to look for liver flukes, and then they also looked for the presence of the liver fluke eggs. And overall, we had about 30 operations test positive for liver flukes. So this is the regional breakout of what we found for the liver flukes, positive operations. And most of the positives were where we expected, which is the Pacific Northwest, Pacific Northwest region. However, we did find flukes in all 4 regions, which was a surprise. All composite fecal samples were cultured, and then those cultures were sent to ARS where they're undergoing metagenomic testing, including species identification and genetic and phylogenic resistance testing. This testing is almost done, and these results will be sent to the producers. Colin was heavily involved in the fecal egg count testing and culture at Louisiana State University, and he actually visited ARS to learn how to do the metagenomic analysis. So he's way more qualified to talk about this than I am, so I'm going to go ahead and let him talk about these results.
All right, thank you, Allison. So as you can see, the most prevalent species that we did see across all 4 regions was Homuncus, Telodrosasia, and Trichostrongylus. Now, Homuncus did reign supreme in terms of its prevalence compared to these other species, but it was interesting to see that we did have quite the diversity of different species. We thought Homuncus, although it was the most prevalent species, we weren't expecting to see such high populations of other species like Telodrosasia and different Trichostrongylus species. And we had smaller but consistent populations of species like Strongyloides and Cuperia esophagosumum as well. For the actual identification from the L3s in the culture, it is hard to distinguish between Telodrosasia and Trichostrongylus species at all times. There's little nuanced differences that are hard to pick up on, and depending on how good the quality of the culture was, we kind of rope those into one group, but that's where some of the molecular work comes into play with NemaBiome and making it a little bit easier to differentiate against these species. So for all regions besides the Western region, Homuncus was the most prevalent throughout the sampling year, with the Western region showing higher cases of Telodrosasia and Trichostrongylus. The Southeastern region, go figure, had the highest diversity in different species of nematodes that we saw, most likely due to the warmer, often wetter climate. What was interesting is that for the Northeastern region that tends to have a little bit colder winters compared to some of these other regions, Homuncus still reigned supreme. We thought we would see higher Telodrosasia and Trichostrongylus populations that, at least at these farms that were sampled from, were present, but not nearly as present as Homuncus. And so I did have a chance to go travel to train under Dr. Thompson in some of this NemaBiome at USDA in Beltsville, Maryland. So as you can see, we have found benzimidazole resistance. That work is still being completed. The particular assay for levamisole is a little bit tricky. It works really well with some species and not so well with others. So there are some kinks to work out with that. And then for NemaBiome, I believe that work is still being completed as well to compare the species identification with that molecular work to the culture work that we did here down in Louisiana.
Great, thanks, Colin.
No problem.
All right, that kind of brings us to the end. The NOMS sheep study is definitely a cooperative effort, and we're very thankful for you all for your support. And then you can also see on the slide under the NOMS team, all the asterisks, those are people that are no longer with NOMS. So our team has gotten a lot smaller this year. So we really appreciate your patience as we get these results to you. The sheep study is still a big priority for NOMS, and we're going to really work hard to get these accurate results to you as quickly as possible. All right, so here is my email address at the USDA, and if you have general questions, that's the general NOMS email. And this bottom is the website where we have all of our reports. We have the Sheep 2011 report up there. Very soon we'll have the goat death loss report up. That should be any day now. So feel free to contact me with any questions, or if you're a producer and you didn't get your results, I'll take that feedback too, and I'll try to get those results to you. Yeah, so I guess we'll open it up to questions now.
Okay, thank you, Allison. That's good. We did have quite a few questions come in while you were talking, and Natalie, if you want to rejoin us here, some of them came in while you were talking, so we'll go ahead and start just sorting through those. And for those of you that haven't already found the question box is available there for you to submit your questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can here in the next few minutes. The ones that we don't get to, we'll try to get to later through email. So Natalie, when you were talking about the on-farm slaughter, was there, maybe it wasn't asked, but was that weighted towards halal or other ethnic slaughter?
I would assume yes. We did not ask specifically if it was ethnic or halal slaughter, but I would assume based on what those operations are doing that would be the case. It said not for personal consumption, so it was for others' consumption, not personal consumption on the farm.
Okay. And on the question of the type of software, was the type of brand of software compared to the size of the flock size managed or gathered? Was there any information captured on the software side?
So we captured the name of the software they were using. That data hasn't been analyzed yet, but we were just curious as far as what types of software options were out there for folks. So we do have that information. I haven't looked at it yet. I don't think anyone on the NOMS team has, but we did not capture any specific information out of that software for those 4% of operations that used a software management service.
Okay, and then a question on the plans to grow. There was, like, I think you said 22% of the operation plan to grow their operation. Do we know how that compared to the 2011 numbers? Or
I may, give me 1 minute. Let me look and see. I don't have it off the top of my head, but we can look in our reports and find that.
Okay, very good. And then we have a question on the fluke diagnosis. Do you think our ability to diagnose fluke in a region could have been limited by the timing of sampling?
Yes. So, you know, we've talked about this extensively as far as liver flukes. So previously we did not have liver flukes reported in the upper Midwest of the US in the Great Lakes region. And that's now the area where we are seeing these liver flukes. And so we used, and Colin or Allison can speak to this more as well. We use the copper antigen ELISA, and then they also use the fluke finder. And so we were able to compare those two results. But based on when the sheep became infected with the liver flukes, we may or may not have captured that information correctly. So at times we had where the ELISA was positive, but the fluke finder was negative, or vice versa. There's always sensitivity and specificity to take into account of those tests. So, you know, there is the potential that we had false negatives or false positives with either of those. However, I think that our information still shows that we are potentially seeing liver flukes in that Great Lakes region. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that we're talking about liver fluke, not deer fluke, which is pretty common in that region as well. And we definitely saw this past year, there was an increase in deer fluke in the upper Midwest. Now, the deer fluke will kill the sheep very quickly. The liver flukes, they kind of live within the sheep. They are happy there, and they cause liver condemnations at slaughter. So we don't necessarily see death due to these liver flukes, but it is something that we want to be aware of as far as the prevalence across the United States. So I think when we're talking about flukes, we need to be very clear whether we're talking about deer fluke or liver fluke. And what we saw in this study was that liver flukes are in that Great Lakes region, which has not been reported previously. And Allison,
Hey.
feel free to add anything to that.
No, that was great. And one of our hypotheses is maybe, you know, the snails have moved towards that Great Lakes region. And we don't know for sure. There will be a manuscript in the future about liver flukes. So keep an eye out for that. We're working on that hard.
Okay, and Allison, on your foot rot slide, you listed 3 pathogens and different percentages for them. Question on, were there any animals with comorbidities? Meaning,
Yeah, there were quite a few sheep that had multiple pathogens, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah. I think the percentages added up higher than the total.
Yes. And that Natalie looked at my slides and she says, this doesn't make sense. But yes, that is why, because there were often one sheep will have multiple pathogens.
Okay, and then I'd be interested in both of your responses to this question. As a sheep producer, how do we take this information and apply it to our operations? It's a pretty broad question, but I don't know what your first reaction is, either one of you.
Do you want me to start, Allison?
There you go.
I think there's a lot of different ways this information can be used and disseminated, right? I think first off, when we talk about the producer level, all farms that participated should have received individualized reports with information. I think it's always good to have that information as far as the benchmarking of the industry. So let's say, for example, if you're a person who has been really thinking about wanting to get into record keeping or what that looks like, and you just haven't done it yet, and you're like, okay, well, now I know, 20% of folks are just using pen and paper. So maybe I just start there, right? And I just start keeping records on pen and paper, and then I figure out a way to get it into Excel and how best to use that information to help make decision-making moving forward. So I think a lot of this just basic general information can really help a producer decide, where does my operation fall in comparison to everyone else in my cohort, whether I'm a very small producer or a large producer, whether I'm a primarily meat producer, if I'm focusing on wool, or where I am in the country, right? Because we know that the way operations are managed and run in the central part of the US are going to be very different than what we see in the Southeast. So I think just using the general information to help understand where your operation falls and how that compares, and then kind of finding those areas where you want to make improvement is a really good way to use these data. From there, I think extension agents, researchers can also look at this data to help write grants, help decide what areas they want to focus in as far as their research, helping to identify those major disease concerns. So whether that's mastitis in our ewes, or if we want to continue trying to sort out this GI parasites and implementic resistance issue that we're having. So it can really help the industry as a whole and help education, research, and extension continue to promote grants and use that money to continue that research.
You're really good at selling the study.
It's easy to sell something that's so important, right?
Yeah, I really feel like this data provides a really good baseline benchmark for the industry. Shows you where, this is not our first study. We've, in 2011, we ask a lot of the same questions. You can see how we've changed as an industry and maybe what we should focus on in the future.
Okay, and we have a question. Do you have Flukiver available to treat barber pole worm? I'm not a veterinarian, so this is out of my league.
I didn't quite understand that question. Did you get it,
Do we have Flukiver? Flukiver? No?
Okay. Colin might be able to answer that because it's
Colin's really the best person to answer this.
Yeah, could you repeat that one more time?
Flukiver, Flukiver is what the question was. to treat
can't.
barber pole worm? Okay,
Yeah,
that's
I
okay.
can't. Yeah, I can't say I've actually heard of that.
Okay, Lori, if you have a clarification on that, that would be fine. If you want to submit that. Okay, let me see what else we got here. We got things popping in pretty fast here now. Hold on a second. Ooh. With the spread of Brucella suis in feral pigs, how many operations include that in their biosecurity panels?
So are you talking about like contact with other animals?
Yeah, feral pigs in particular, and I know they're prevalent in the South. Is there?
Yeah, I know we asked about that in, is it our BS questionnaire, Natalie?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
we
so
asked
we'll,
about whether or not they have contact with feral pigs or if they know there's feral pigs on their operation. We don't ask specifically if they're testing for Brucella suis. We do ask about Brucella ovis, but that's definitely something to keep in mind moving forward. We would have the information around percentage of operations that have sheep that come in contact with feral swine, if that's of interest for someone who wants to continue to research that topic.
yeah,
So
that'll be on our
background.
phase.
Oh, go ahead.
That'll be in our phase 2 report.
Okay.
So won't be the one that comes out soon.
Yeah, background. The person is in Hawaii and says they're seeing spillover in other species like horses, cattle, and dogs. And depending upon the lab that it's submitted to, they don't always include it in the panel. So that was the background behind it. Okay, let's see. Oh, on the question on the fluciverse, she says it treats just barber pole worm to help treat resistance to barber pole. I don't understand that. Okay. All right.
I thought flucovir was Closantil, if I remember however you say the drug. So I don't know about using that to treat resistance in barber pole worm.
Okay. On the management software programs, was the NSIP LAM plan included in any fashion, or was there data on that? How many people use that?
Yeah, I would have to check and see if people wrote that in as their management software. We haven't looked at what the write-ins were.
Yeah,
so
was that a write-in?
included it? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't looked
And
at those.
I do have a response for you as far as the growth that we've seen in the industry between 2011 and 2024. So the number reported in 2011 of operations that expected to have more sheep, it was 23.9%. So it's pretty comparable to what we saw here at 22%. I think if we were to look at those statistically with standard errors, there would be no difference.
Okay, thanks for looking at that. That's timely because we had a follow-up regarding plan to grow operations. Is the data granular enough to determine if they're meat, wool, milk, or other operations?
We do look at that. Let me see if I have that information here. I know I have it potentially by size. What we're really seeing is in regard to size that we're seeing, let's see. That those that are exiting the industry, so those that are leaving are really those smaller flocks. So the medium and large operations seem to be holding pretty steady. Where we're seeing folks entering and exiting the industry is in those small and very small flocks, which really suggests that our total flock numbers will probably stay pretty consistent. As far as region, I have a higher percentage of operations in the West reported expecting to have no sheep in 5 years compared to the Southeast region. So we're seeing that growth in the Southeast region. And then also in the Southeast region, 31.7% we're expecting to increase that inventory. So they're really representing a decent chunk of that growth, which was significantly higher in the West. In the West, we saw 12.4% of operations expecting to grow. So I guess what this really shows is that we're expecting emerging growth in that Southeast region, potentially tied to expanding demand for those hair breeds, access to local processing, and then diversified grazing systems as well. We could look at it as far as primary production type, and that will be done in the first report that will come out hopefully during 2026.
Those are interesting numbers. Question on foot rot, any improvement or data on the efficacy of foot rot vaccination?
Is Ginny on the call? I don't have any information. Do you, Natalie?
No, but we will have information on the percentage of operations that used the foot rot vaccine during 2023. So we'll be able to have some numbers around that, but I don't think we have any additional information around the efficacy of the vaccine itself.
Right, and that's going to be in our next phase, phase 2.
Okay, and on the collection of the fecal egg count samples, question was what time of year or stage of production were those collected?
Yeah, so we collected those between April and December. I would say the majority were collected late summer. I would say July, August, September were the majority of the collection. What was the next part of the question? Sorry.
That was the question. It was basically
That was the question.
What time
Yeah.
of year? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And we collected those from ewes primarily. Occasionally they asked us to do some lambs, so we would do those separately, but those weren't included in these results. So they're ewes.
Okay. And we got an OPP question. Do you think there may be an opportunity to test the serum samples for OPP and compare those results to what we're seeing clinically on farms?
Yeah, I mean, we have the serum. If anybody wants to do the testing.
Yeah. I'll just give a quick plug for that serum bank because it was something we worked hard to do. So for all of the sheep that had scrapie genotype testing done, we also took another tube for serum. That serum was shipped to NVSL and spun down and aliquoted into 3 to maybe 6 different aliquots. And so those are sitting there at NVSL. It would be great that they get put to use, right? There's no reason to collect things if they're just going to sit there in the lab. So hopefully over time, as things kind of settle down and NOMS regain some staff, potentially we can, or Allison can ask for proposals and we can get those samples out to individuals that could use them for research. So, and all of those research proposals that come in, normally we work closely with industry, so the American sheep industry, to make sure that they're being used to meet the goals of industry itself and that they're being used to support the sheep industry as a whole.
Okay, and another question on just the data gathering in general. Why was no data gathered from the white states in your map, Natalie?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So it's really a resource constraint issue, right? We only have so much money and we only have so many folks out there doing sampling. So as much as we would love to do a census of the whole sheep industry and get every producer involved, it's just not feasible from a resource point of view. So what we do is we look at the number of operations and the percentage of sheep in each state, and then we select our states based on that information. So we select states that generally have a high percentage of sheep and a high percentage of operations, and then we balance that with areas that we know we really want to target. So even though there were some states in the Southeast that had smaller numbers, we really needed them to support the development of that region and make sure we had enough data to extrapolate back to the population as a whole in that region. So yeah, as much as I think I would have loved to have done a census of all the states, the government, it's just not feasible to do that as far as funding. So we had to limit it to a certain number of states. However, this is one of the few studies that NOMS has done that has 30 states. So we really did get a good chunk of the U.S.
Natalie did push for a lot of states. More states, oh no.
Hawaii. I mean, I would have loved to gone and sample sheep in Hawaii, but and they are generally pretty dense, but I could not convince everyone up the chain to agree to that.
Make a nice wintertime trip, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What genetic test is used to determine parasite resistance, and is it breed specific?
So I can speak for the genetic testing that we're currently doing with the parasite samples. What we're looking at is the resistance in the parasite itself. So in terms of what resistance is available in the animal, I don't know if we really collected data for this particular study on that, but we're looking at genes that give the parasite resistance rather than the host.
Thanks, Colin. And another Hawaii question or comment. Any research being done on larger scale using kelp or red seaweed to reduce fecal egg shedding? They say they got results that are in Hawaii that are looking promising. Anybody know anything about that?
This is Colin's postdoc.
Yeah, I'd love to see the results.
I know if Joan Burke is in the audience, she does a lot of work around alternative methods to control parasites. So if you were to reach out to anyone, she'd be my go-to person.
Okay, this might, Natalie, you might want to answer this one in terms of the demographics of the data. Can you correlate those flock owners that never heard of scrapie with flock size?
Yes, yeah, that will be in the report. I think is that in the first report, Allison?
Yeah, I can look at it. I'll try to pull it up here.
Yeah, yeah, we can look real quick at that information and let you know. My guess it is the smaller producers, but we will. If we sit tight for a minute, Allison might be able to get us those numbers.
Okay. I think we're pretty much to the end of the questions. There's one more here. Any data on effectiveness of BioWerma, especially given the cost?
We asked about the use of it, so we'll know how many folks are using it. My guess is it's pretty small given the cost. But once again, I don't think we have any information around the effectiveness. We could potentially look at the operations that were using it, and if they submitted GI parasite results, see if we could find any differences there. But my guess is given the small number of operations that use it, that would be a difficult task to do. Colin, do you have any thoughts around that?
So we do have some data in our lab unrelated to the NOMS project, and Dr. Joan Burke, again, would be a great point of contact on that in the audience. So I believe she's done way more work than we have on that, or with that.
Okay, I think we've reached the end of the questions. Oh, go ahead.
I think
Allison.
I think I have the scrapie. The question was familiarity based on flock size. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
For scrapie?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We have that a higher percentage of medium flocks were very familiar with scrapie compared with small flocks and very small flocks. And then a higher percentage of very small flocks and small flocks had never heard of scrapie compared with medium and large flocks. So again, the smaller flocks were less familiar than the larger flocks in another way to put that.
Okay. I think that about wraps it up here. Kim, you did have your hand up. I don't know if you still had a question or not. I'll put ask to unmute. If you want to unmute Kim and ask your question, you're welcome to do that.
Hey, anyway, I just want to say thank you very much. This was a very informative, really well done study. I'm one of the state veterinarians here. I also raise sheep. And I want to say, if anybody wants to come out and do the research here, I have a lot of connections. And no, seriously, if you tie together the limu, mainly because we don't have a season here. It's worm season year round. It's our number one. So even using genetics, I mean, I don't talk about parasite resistance animals. I talk about parasite resilient. Just from what I've seen, I raise Katahdins for that reason. I got them from the Southeast for that reason. And when I first got the sheep over here, about half the flock died. We had 4 hurricanes in a row. they had a hard time. But what I find is when I get the next generation and my animals are about a year, they tend to do better. And they handle the homuncus, but it's the Couperia and the nodular worm that will take them out at about 4 or 5 years of age. So we've got some different things going on in the tropics, as well as mineral imbalances, like almost no copper. This volcano is really screwing things up across the board. So again, there's a lot of really interesting research to be done over here that might spill over. So because of those reasons, if anything, that's why we're looking at the lemurs right here. And for BioWorma, I calculated the cost per head just because shipping and the Jones Act and the weight of BioWorma getting here, it was over $5 per head per day to feed it. And because of that, you'd have to use it when you noticed an increase in your egg production, like periparturient, weaning time. And even then, it was just really too cost prohibitive. So we're looking at trying to reduce fecal egg shedding on pastures. If this LEMU works, again, I'm just throwing it out there as a tickler. Again, there have been some studies done, but the other thing that was nice is it increased the rate of growth production as well as decreased methane production. So if people are getting into the carbon credit thing, that might be something that might change the ruminant industry as a whole. And I was just wondering if there was any more research on a larger scale going on. Come to Hawaii. We'll show you a good time.
We are getting some volunteers in the audience.
I know it's hard because they look at that going, you want to go to Hawaii to study what? But if you guys can get here, we've got places to put you up and we'll show you around. And we have some pretty active sheep and goat members. Most of the herds or flocks that we have are definitely in the smaller 25 head or less. But then we also have Kahua Ranch that ran several thousand, and they actually bring in shearers and whatnot. It used to be a pretty large sheep industry here way, way long ago.
Hey, thank you. Well, I think we're ready to wrap up. Dr. Wolf, Dr. Logan, if you guys have any parting comments you want to add, feel free to pop back in. But Natalie and Allison and Colin, thank you for your expertise presenting. Actually, just thank you for doing this work, period. I think everybody finds it very valuable, and certainly for taking the time in these early stages of the results to come on and talk about what you're finding and answer questions. Everybody appreciates that. And then certainly thank you to USDA APHIS and for the funding, and American Sheep Industry Association for making these webinars possible, Amy Hendrickson for coordinating some of this stuff. For our audience, this is recorded. There will be a recording posted on the ASI YouTube channel, and that should show up in one of their Friday or Thursday now newsletters with links to that. We really appreciate you coming on and joining us and answering or asking such great questions of our speakers. So Alice and Natalie, thank you once again. And with that, we'll go ahead and sign off.
Jay, we want to thank you for doing the good job of moderating too.
I do my best. It's hard sometimes to pronounce some of these things.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Okay, good evening, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.